Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 18th regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Just like to let you know that Todd is homesick, so that's why I'm sitting in this chair tonight. So we will start with a call to order. Candace, please.
Candace Bouchard.
Jonathan Morehart.
Josh Kelly.
Candy Perez.
Glenn Albanesius.
Stephen Sedlak.
Linda Grappo.
Jack Bork.
Okay, thank you. Would you please join us for a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
to the members of the board and town manager, anything on the agenda review? Anybody see?
Given the fact that the mayor is not here, I would like to request that we push off the executive session to the next meeting.
For the annual review for the town manager.
That's right.
Is there a consensus for everybody here? Yes? Okay.
Move it to the next meeting.
Yes.
Anything else for anyone? Okay, if not, we'll move to item 4, which is approval of the regular minutes on April 4th. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any additions, corrections for Glenn? If not, all in favor? Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Next, we have the approval of our special meeting minutes on April 11th. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any corrections, additions for that one? I can do that. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay.
One abstention, I
One
wasn't here.
abstention. Okay. So number 5 is, for those of you in the audience, this is citizens' comments. We would like to welcome you to citizens' comments. Speakers have 3 minutes if you'd like to speak. And you speak once during this round if you would like, and give your name and where you live if you wouldn't mind, if anybody wants to speak. The microphone at the center table is where you would come.
David LaPointe, 11 Hillside Avenue, Winchester, Connecticut. I'm here tonight, number one, to say that this $18.3 million bond that is being put forward by the town manager and this Board of Selectmen, if you so see it to be put forward, I believe will be one of the biggest bonds in the history of Winchester. I do not think that the taxpayers of this town can afford it at this time. Certainly, we do need roads to be restructured, redone. There's significant roads that have already been redone, over $8 million since 2016 of good taxpayers' money that you, the selectmen, previous boards, have put forward in an infrastructure program that was initiated, I believe, under your administration, and which bodes well for the town. Just to let you know, according to the figures that have been presented multiple times by the town manager, at 18.3 million, supposedly the cost, it actually works out to be over $26 million after 20 years of paying the bond principal and the total payments. That's if we get a 4.5% bond percentage rating, on that bond. Bonds right now are going up and up as the Fed has upped the interest rates. So certainly we should put money, I believe in your new budget, it's $860,000 more than last year for roads in the infrastructure, and that's good. The townspeople will support roads, but not this big, and thank you for getting this, if it was Bob Geiger or whoever, got that 800,000 for new sidewalks. That's more than what's for the bond, 600,000 for sidewalks, because there is sidewalks and do need for repair. Also in this budget, I see that there's a 4% increase in the town manager's budget. I assume, and maybe you can tell me, you were getting 120,000, now you're gonna get 125,000, so it's a $5,000 raise, which equals 4%. You reported that regular employees in the town, for the most part, were getting 2.3, 2.4% on an average. You've been here, almost a year. I told you when I met you first time, I wished you well, and I said that I didn't think that you should be coming in at the top rate as Mr. Geiger went out at, and I say it again. And I am happy to see that your budget, the town clerk, lowered the budget in the town clerk's office by 8.05%. I think that's great, and so did the tax collector. And she lowered hers by 0.11%. So that's good. So that bodes well for the taxpayers, because we see that departments can do budgetary restraints, as opposed to, yes, we get this amount of money, and then, yeah, we got to spend all that, because then we might have to get more. Now, the Board of Education has done a yeoman's job.
3 minutes.
Yeoman's job, the Board of Education. But Gilbert obviously has to do better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Rob Aslan. I reside at 228 Smith Hill Road. First, I'd like to start by saying that I'm not against the fire department in any way. I support them and think they should have the proper equipment needed to perform their job safely and keep the town safe. I don't know who made the statement in the Winchester Wire mailer, "Our current truck has outlived its useful life," but I find that statement deceitful and very misleading. Facts. The tower truck has been well maintained from the day it was put into service in 1996. It goes out annually to have fluid film applied to the undercarriage to prevent corrosion, and it also goes out annually for safety inspections. I find it hard to believe that in the past 5 years since I got out of the fire department, that this truck has deteriorated to the point that it's past its useful life. Yes, this truck is 27 years old, but it is 100% operational, and it passes its annual safety inspection. Why are we trying to replace a perfectly good piece of apparatus due to its age? How do we arbitrarily come up with a $1.4 million figure when the truck isn't even spec'd out yet? Is the new proposed truck even going to fit into the existing firehouse with new NFPA standards on apparatus without additional costs or modifications to the firehouse? I have no issues with a bonding package for roadways or infrastructure, water and sewer lines, drainage, curbs, sidewalks, but I cannot support a bonding package with a $1.4 million fire truck that is no more of a want than a necessity. I feel it is foolish and a waste of the taxpayers' money to replace a perfectly good piece of equipment. And also, I sent an email to Josh, town manager, and he was supposed to relay the messages according to the Winchester Wire to the Board of Selectmen. So did anybody see an email from me? Did you receive an email from me?
I would have to go back in my messages to refresh myself.
I just want to make sure that gets relayed because it has more to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay, thank you. Next up on our agenda item is the town manager's report.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Katie. The first thing I'm so very excited to say is that the town of Winchester was awarded a $1.8 million grant from the state of Connecticut through the Communities Challenge Grant Program. We are the smallest town by population to receive a grant. We were not the smallest grant awarded, and I really want to thank the tireless effort and work, especially in the month of January, that went into this by Jim Rollins, our Director of Public Works, Bart Clark, our Program Administrator, Anne-Marie Rowe, who's here tonight, our Director of Finance, and Allison Pierce, who's our Grants Manager. This wouldn't have been possible without them. This does include $800,000 for sidewalks, as was mentioned earlier during public comment. This includes $829,000 and change for paving on Bridge Street and a whole lot more. So it's wonderful to see that kind of support from the state. It's very clear that they share our vision for a positive future for Main Street here in Winstead, and I just couldn't be more proud. Going on from there, there are a lot of other, pockets of money that we're trying to put to good use right now to make sure that Winstead's in as good a place, Winchester's in as good a place as it can be. With the American Rescue Plan Act, the first 45% of those funds were allocated already back in December by the Board of Selectmen. In May, I just want to remind the Board of Selectmen I will be bringing a second round of proposals forward for use of that other 55%. Going on from there, tonight we will later on, I just want to make sure it's on everyone's minds, have a conversation with and perhaps a short presentation about conservation easements. The Planning and Zoning Commission did complete its review of the proposed 1,200 acre of conservation easement sale that was discussed and reviewed by the Board of Selectmen back some months ago. Tonight we have Tim Abbott here with us from the Housatonic Valley Association, who'll be able to speak a little bit more to the program, answer some lingering questions if you might have them, and we might be able to move that forward to a town meeting for consideration. With the facade and business startup programs, I hope everyone had the opportunity to see online this weekend or see in the newspaper, although there were a couple typos in the newspaper that I'll need to ask for corrections on. But the town has put forward a number of facade program awards as well as business startup program awards. That's 5 new businesses that will be able to come into town with the help of some of that money, and that's another 13 businesses that will receive some type of support from the town in order to improve their facade and building in general. So that's a wonderful thing. And again, very proud of all the work that's gone into that. And I hope that everybody else is satisfied with the results of that too. That is round 1. We are no longer accepting applications for the facade program. That's been closed for over a month now, but we are still accepting applications for the business startup program. So if you're somebody who has always toyed with the idea of opening a business, or you know somebody who might be interested in relocating a business to town or opening their first ever business, now's the time to apply. We still have another 5 awards, up to another 5 awards that could be made. That's my report for now. Are there any questions from the members of the Board of Selectmen?
Anyone? Okay, thank you. Next, we have our finance director's report, and this is for the regular work going on in our regular fiscal year 22 budget.
Good evening. I know that we did not have a subcommittee meeting, so if you have any additional questions, you can let me know, because we didn't end up meeting last week because of the holiday. Looking at the general fund results as of March 31st, 2022, we are 75% through the fiscal year. Current year-to-date property tax, total property tax revenue is at $24.866 million, which is 101.74% of budgeted, and that's in comparison to the last year of $24.109 million, which was at 99.73%. Some of what's driving that property tax revenue, I'll just highlight. Our past due collections are at $407,000 year to date, which is 135.96% of budgeted, and that's in comparison to $180,000 for the same period last year, which was at 55% I did reach out to the tax collector's office, and most of that is attributable to the work that our assessor's office and our tax collector's offices have done to work with our residents who have back due taxes and come up with agreements to get those residents and businesses current on their tax collections. So I thank them for their hard work on that. Total revenues year-to-date are $30.503 million, which is 87.43% of budget, in comparison to $29.539 million, which was 86.5%. In 2021 budget, in comparison to 22, we are $742,000 higher in our budget, so we are running well in comparison to the prior year, looking at total revenues. Total expenditures year-to-date, we're at $24.944 million, which is 71.49% of budget, in comparison to 70% of budget last year at $23.958 million. We received, most of the municipal aid we received in the month of March was for the Board of Education. We had a couple small reimbursements, one for asset forfeiture for the police department, and I'll get to the other piece that we received was a reimbursement from the state in capitals. Cash flow at the end of March 31st, we're at $12.501 million in the general fund. 8.7 million of that was invested, 6.5 of that in the Northwest Community Bank sweep, and 2.2 million in the state STIF fund. On the capital side, where we still continue to have ongoing engineering and road maintenance costs, we received $32,000 back from the state of Connecticut for engineering cost reimbursement from Leonard. And then we are still waiting on the state of Connecticut DAS reimbursement of 2.5 on the Hinsdale School. And the line of credit, we're still at the $5 million of the $10 million on the 3-year non-revolving line of credit. Was there any questions?
So basically, we're on track with everything's good, expenditures and revenue for.
Yes, there are a few departments that we see line items that are over budget.
But that'll all be.
What I'm going to do in May is we're going to come we'll bring some budgetary transfers for the line items within the departments. As of looking at it right now, there is none of the departments that are over budget on an overall basis, but we will look to do some budgetary transfers, in particular, from our snow and just some other smaller line items. Most of those, I think, we've kind of identified them when we've met in the previous month. There was nothing really newer.
But the bottom lines are
Yes.
looking good.
Yep.
Cassie, the $32,000 you said for Leonard Engineering, that came into capital, the state reimbursed, what project was that for?
That I don't know in particular what that one was for. I just looked at the summary today when I did that, and I didn't know. I was the only one in the department today other than Allison, so I didn't identify what that particularly was for.
Okay.
Does Jim, do you know what that might have been on?
That's reimbursement for the utility relocation on the Raleigh Street Bridge.
See, there you go.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Also, well, you'll be here for the rest of the night, so if somebody thinks of one, they'll come
Yeah.
back and ask you.
Perfect.
Next up is correspondence. If anybody on the board had anything they wanted to highlight, or Josh, go ahead.
I just have a few emails that came in that I wanted to share with all of you about the infrastructure plan. Michael Farrell of 147 Shore Drive did email in to inquire about the status of East Wakefield Boulevard and pose questions about the specs of the proposed fire department truck. We had George Connor of Oakdale Ave who asked for Old New Hartford Road to be paved. We have Maureen and William Donovan of Glendale Ave asked for Glendale Ave to be paved. We had Marty Pillar, who did not reference where he may live, asked that Blue Street be looked at. And we had Kevin Steck, who asked if West Wakefield Boulevard, more of it may be done very soon after this bond is complete. Did note very specifically that he was happy to see that all of this work is getting done. just wanted to share that there were some questions that came in after the Winchester wire went out. Those were all tended to, and a response was given that we're doing our best to get all of the roadways addressed as quickly as possible, but that this is the proposal on the table at this time unless the board sees fit to change that.
Anybody else with anything? If not, Steve, boards and commissions, please.
Okay, if you'd refer to the information in your package, we have some appointments and reappointments this evening. We'll start with appointment of Claudia Dela Cruz, and I will move that the board appoint Claudia Dela Cruz as a member of the Recreation Board, term to expire on April of 2028.
May I have a second for that, please?
I will second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other questions? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
Further, I will move that the board appoint Leanne Marvin as a member of the Conservation Commission, term to expire in May of 2027.
May I have a second for that, please? Linda, thank you. Any questions? If not, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
I move that the board appoint Ellen Babcock as a member of the Ad hoc Water Level Committee, a term to expire in April of 2024.
I'll second that. Anybody have any questions? If not, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you.
And we have two reappointments this evening. I'll move that the board reappoint Sally Manjone as a member of the Housing Authority, term to expire in April of 2027.
All in favor?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you.
and lastly, I will move that the board nominate David Sardarana as a member of the Economic Development Commission, alternate position, term to expire in April of 2027.
I'll second.
Thank you.
You mean a reappointment?
Reappoint.
Any questions? Any more, I should say? If not, all in favor? Okay, great, thanks.
As
Anything?
is for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're gonna move into a couple things now that should take a bunch of time. What I'd like to do, if it's okay with the board, is that we take A for the 2023 budget and just slide it to B and move B up because we have bond counsel with us tonight. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. So I'm gonna turn it over to Josh to introduce our bond counsel. Now, these people are here just for the audience and people watching at home. This is for the infrastructure bond that we've been talking about that will be discussed by the board after the bond presentation from the bond attorneys and whatnot, and Josh. And this would be something that we would be either sending or not sending to the public to vote on at referendum and to town meetings after this. So there's a whole series of things that happen after this as well as tonight.
Absolutely, thank you. And so, Anne Marie, if you'd like to bring the group on up, but tonight we have with us our bond counsel, that's Glenn Rybecki here. And then we also have our bond advisor, newly appointed. Matt, I apologize, I haven't been with you long enough to pronounce your last name correct, but I'm gonna guess it's Matt Spoondale.
Spurndle.
Spurndle.
Yeah, that was a good one.
All right.
That was a good try.
And just remind all of you, you need to talk into the mic, because if you're not, then that one doesn't
Yeah, the
pick up very
recording.
well.
So how do we want to? So for clarification, I'm the municipal advisor of Phoenix Advisors, and we work with the town, depending on the project and if the project's approved, et cetera, with respect to the bond issuance, working with the credit rating agencies, selling the bonds, et cetera. So this schedule that Anne Marie handed out, I put together for her, and I can walk you through it, walk through the process a little bit. But I don't know if you want to do that first, or the legal part of, this is the bond counsel who handles all the legal components. So I don't know how you guys want to work it in terms of what you'd like to hear from first.
I'm going to jump in because maybe, my name is Glenn Rybecki and I'm bond counsel to the town. I drafted the documents that are before you right now.
You have to put the mic right in your.
Oh, okay. I drafted the documents that are before you right now, and maybe what I should do is give you a little background what they're doing. Mechanically, what the process is to get to a bonding situation is that the Board of Selectmen, and that's what is in front of you tonight, would be that you would approve the bond resolution, which you have in front of you, as well as setting the town meeting and the referendum dates, because as a additional appropriation per the charter, this is something that can't be dispensed at a town meeting. It has to go to referendum. What the resolution does at this point is it does two very important things. It appropriates the money. That includes what gets funded with any bonds. It also includes what might get funded with grants or any other monies that you have. So think of that as that's the authority to spend money. What it also does is it provides a borrowing authorization, and that's when we're talking bonds, notes, or other instruments of that nature. What it does is that it authorizes the issuance of bonds to fund those appropriations, and think of it, it acts as a cap, almost like a credit cap, if you want to think of it that way. It's what you can borrow, but it's going to be subject to IRS rules so that you can get a tax exempt rate, which is certainly to the benefit of the town. And that's the other role that I play. I'm here for putting the authorizations together. Then it's up to Matt and the finance folks and Josh and you all on the Board of Selectmen to pick and choose when you want to go to sell bonds or to move the projects forward. That's when I step back in again, and what my job is that when Matt sells bonds, I do all the paperwork that basically validates the borrowing, as well as making sure that it complies with federal tax rules. That one of those items that covers federal tax rules is one, if you get grants and such, that's going to reduce the authorization for bonds, because the federal government doesn't want you doubling up. You don't want to double up. What it also does is it says when you can issue bonds. A very important piece is that the borrowings mirror the cash flow needs. So if you were going to spend the money across, say, 3 or 4 years, this is something that's going to roll for a couple years, the federal government doesn't want you borrowing it all up front and have you sit on it for 3 years. That would violate the tax rules, and that would put you in a position where your bonds would become taxable and cost more. My job is to make sure you don't do that. I work for you to protect you in that regard, and that's what the paperwork would do. And that would be my role in the process here.
So just for the dates in here, tonight's meeting, is this the date that we have to do things, make an approval to send it to a special town meeting, or do we have more time? Is this it?
The way we had put the calendar together, this would be approving the resolution as it's written. This would be setting the town meeting, and it would be setting the referendum date tonight. Yes.
Okay, so how much time do we have to do this tonight? Do we have any other time, or is this it?
The calendar, if we wanted to make the referendum date of May 28th,
Yes.
We're probably pretty close. At the most, maybe you'd maybe have a week to kind of digest things in that regard. By setting everything tonight, it keeps us on the calendar for the 28th, but it doesn't mean that you can't pull things back. You know, one thing that with these documents that I want you to know is that you are still in control of everything. It's not you do it and then all of a sudden it takes on a life of its own.
Right.
Nothing was drafted in that regard because that's your jobs, I guess, if you want to say it, to keep this in order.
Well, I'm asking that question on purpose because we'll be seeing these numbers for the first time tonight. So I wanted to make sure the board, we know when we have to make the final decision. I mean, obviously, we can make a decision tonight, but if we wanted to look at these numbers and have a meeting, let's say on Thursday, to move it forward to, I just don't want to miss the deadline.
If you give me a few moments to look, because what there is there are statutory requirements for warnings and such, and I have to make sure that if we go out a few days, does that put us up against the date? And I can do that now.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking the
I just need to take a moment, if you don't mind.
So if you do that while he does his,
Sure.
do you want to?
Unless you want some more, I can answer other questions before I do that if you want to.
For now, we'll let you calculate.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Matt, just to preface everything that you're going to share with the board, I'll just say we've had a lot of conversations, right, about how everything's going to be structured. You just heard here tonight from our bond counsel that borrowing everything up front is not in the best interests of the town from a tax perspective, and I think that the conversations we've had recently suggest that borrowing everything up front also isn't in the best interest of the town's financials, and making sure that we are minimizing the direct impact to residents, especially all up front in the first year. So the proposal that you have in front of you tonight, certainly I'll let Matt talk about it a little bit more, but you are going to see that it spans several years. You are going to see that it includes the Hinsdale bonding. We tried to be thorough. We tried to be holistic in our approach to this. And thank you to both Matt and Anne Marie for really doing the hard work to put this together. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Josh, and good evening to the board. I'm happy to be here, happy to be able to potentially walk the town through something that you all haven't really done in quite some time. The last bond issue in the traditional sense, I think, was 2004. So there's a lot of things that need to get done that you're probably not as familiar with. And we can talk about the process. We could talk about what goes into a deal and the documents and the official statements and the credit. But I think today, unless you could tell me otherwise, we're just going to look at what I've put together with Anne Marie is basically, I call it like the foundation-based case of what we're looking at in the event that this road project does get approved and move forward, and also looping in the Hinsdale project and the timing of that. So assuming that the legal things are all taken care of and that the project is ultimately approved, we then go and look at, okay, what's the cash flow, what's the timing of the project, when is the town going to need the funding, and in this case, we're looking at a multi-year, a project that will cover like a multi-year time period, which really goes to fiscal 27 with respect to the roads. So we looked at, okay, cash flows, what interest rates are now, market conditions, et cetera, and said, all right, if we just look at a very plain vanilla base case, which would include 20-year bond issues, so each bond is 20 years, which is the norm for these types of projects in Connecticut and elsewhere. We look at the structure being level principal, which again we have some flexibility with, but level structure means level principal each year. So unlike a mortgage where you pay very little in principal in the beginning and a much higher percentage of principal at the end, most issues in Connecticut are done with equal principal over the 20-year term. So that's what you can see on the sheet before you. Stop me at any time if I'm talking too fast or you have any questions. But I'm basically just going to walk you through sort of left to right and just referencing some other things. Really on that first page, the page in the back has a lot more stuff, but this is really the meat and potatoes of the thing. So if you want to start from the left is your outstanding debt, which we all know you have very little. It falls off in the next couple of years. I think that's like a 2008 direct purchase of some kind. But if we were to move sort of more to the right, say column F would be potentially, again, based on cash flows and things I've talked about with Anne Marie, is the first bond issue, primarily for the road projects. And the fire truck, I guess, would be in there too. And we looked at, all right, a $10.85 million bond issuing in October of 22, again, based on potential cash flow needs. All of these things can be adjusted. All of these things can be tweaked. These are just forecasts. Interest rates change. We all know that. So these are just something that kind of give us an idea of where we are at this point. So we issue in October of 22. You would, under the normal sort of plain vanilla structure, pay one interest payment 6 months later, which would be April of 23, which would be that fiscal year 23, $162,000 right there. And then 6 months later, you pay principal along with your interest. And as you move along and you pay that principal off, you see the interest goes down each year. So that would be the proposed first bond, again, in October of '22, based on the cash flow needs, which are representative in that box, that red box at the bottom middle of your screen, or of your sheet right there, which I got from the town. So we have that project, that bond issue in October. Again, going with the cash flows, you'd potentially have an issue in July of '23. And whether it's July or August, none of that really matters. It's just a matter of sort of putting it in that fiscal year where the cash flows are needed. In this particular case, we said we're going to take 2.35, which would be for the roads, and also then you have the Hinsdale, which would be part of the same bond issue. So I separated them just so you can kind of see the different impacts, but those would be done as part of the same issue. And that Hinsdale is 6 million, again, roughly, could be higher, could be lower. But we'd assume that, again, 20-year equal principal. At the interest rates are shown above in the yellow box, sort of up to the left of the sheet. 3%, 3.25%, 3.5% is where I've sort of landed on in this current environment. There's a lot of talk, and there was a comment earlier about interest rates, and the Fed's going to be moving rates, and rates are obviously going to be moving up, et cetera. Just for your knowledge, interest rates in the municipal bond market have already moved up. The expectation of the Fed moving the Fed funds rate 6 or 7 times potentially this year has impacted the bond market already. So to put it in perspective, we were doing bond issues at 150, 160. Now we're at 3% over the course of a couple of months. So the bond market's already reacted. I wouldn't be surprised if over the course of the next 6 months, rates sort of maybe stabilize a bit, and based on what the Fed does or doesn't do, or changes their language in some of their meetings, those rates could stabilize, they could drift down. I think, there's a lot of volatility because of expectation. We don't know what those things are until they become reality. So at that point, that's why we have 3% now, 3.25% for the next issue, and maybe 3.50 towards the end. We can adjust these rates, and it runs through the schedule to see what the impacts might be. But we have that July 23 issue, and then again with the cash flows, our final cash flow need would be roughly July 25, which is really when that $4.5 million or so kicks in. So we have that issue there that you can see at 5.1, which just kind of catches all the rest of the road bonds. And then as we move over, you have column R, which is the total road bonds, which we show as about 24 million and change in terms of total debt service over the course of the 20 years, based on these interest rates and these debt service, these bonded numbers. You have the Hinsdale right next to it in that column S, total proposed as we move along in column T, and then the total all with your existing, the total road and the total Hinsdale school. And you can see, obviously, you're paying $400,000 today on bonds that you have outstanding. It's going to go up to potentially $1.7 million, $1.8 million, all in, if everything kind of works out the way we have laid out here. So, it's a big undertaking. There's a lot that goes into it. This is sort of the foundation. Again, there's modifications that could be made, but based on the size of the issues, the cash flow needs, this is, I think, a really strong sort of first base case scenario, just to kind of give you an overall idea of what things could look like going forward. So does anyone have any questions on that at the moment?
There are just a couple things I'd like to point out,
Yeah,
Matt.
yeah, sure.
First is I just want to articulate to the Board of Selectmen, I think with the budget that we've developed, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes here, but I think we've set ourselves up really well. Going into this year, we have $400,000 in the budget for the road bond at the current moment, or at least what's proposed. And there was discussion at the last special meeting, and we'll talk about it again in just a few minutes here, about putting an extra sum of money aside to help cover the Hinsdale bonds, kind of a sinking fund for our debt service. So when you add all of that together, we're already putting money ahead for some of these larger jumps that you're going to see. So that $813,122 that you see as being an increase in fiscal year 2024 you know, we're already biting into when that rolls over from this year into next. Well, we've already achieved about $400,000 of that in the leftover money that we're going to have from this year rolling into next. So that's going to help us smooth out these jumps that you're seeing in these numbers. I think it sets up ourselves for success so that we're taking a little chunk at a time and that we're able to manage these changes as a town as we go forward. There was one other thing that I was going to mention, but it's escaped me. I'll come back to it. But if there's any other questions.
Yeah, when is the date that you plan to put, that we get the Hinsdale bonds out? Like, is Hinsdale gonna be rolled into the roads, or is it going separate in terms of the borrowing?
Well, based on what we have listed here, we estimated a bond issue for Hinsdale of July 23. I think because that's when the project is going to be complete or basically done. And so that would be done at the same time as that road $2.3 million bond. So basically, there are those two, there's a couple of columns here that would be done simultaneously. So really, this is an October 22 bond, a July 23 bond, and a July 25 bond. So there's 3 total bond issues. Because Hinsdale and part of the roads are combined into one.
Okay, but Hinsdale's gonna be finished this year, 2022.
Okay.
We're not gonna,
That, based on what Bruce has provided, we won't bond until next year, until a minimum of June of next year, because we have to wait for all grants to play out,
okay.
to know what your final bond number is going to be.
So when will our first Hinsdale bond payment be? What date? Like,
So-
not what year, what date?
The date, well, again, based on this, and this is all subject to, adjustment or continued discussion, is if it's a July 23 bond, we make an interest payment in January of 24 and a first principal of July 24. So that'd be fiscal 25.
All right, and what's the date that the 2008 bond gets paid? What's the last day that that
So,
bond?
the actual day, I know it's fiscal year 24.
I know, but I want to know that.
Oh, see, the dates aren't as important for us, because it's fiscal
Well,
year.
because the importance of that date is because that money then has to go pay Hinsdale.
Well, right, but so we look at it in terms of fiscal year totals.
Right, but fiscal year totals also require taxes.
Right, of course.
So, so if we know when it's, if we're gonna still have 2008 and Hinsdale and roads all in one year, that's what I wanna know.
Well, the only thing, in the same year, you'd have the overlap, would you have one interest payment on Hinsdale of 90, well, again, these are estimates, of under 100,000 due in fiscal year 25. So that would be put into your budget that you do in.
24.
Oh, sorry, 24, yeah.
But that also is with the 2008 388, right?
Yep,
And also with the 859 road bond?
correct.
So the 97 Hinsdale and the road bonds are gonna hit before this bond expires.
The Hinsdale interest would hit, the principal would not have hit yet.
But the road is also gonna
Well,
hit.
road, of course, yeah.
Before that expires in '24.
Right, correct. That's true.
So taxes have to carry all that in '24.
Right, of course. Yeah, so in '24, you'd have to budget in May of '23.
Right, so next
For
year,
that,
when
yeah.
we're sitting here
Right, of course.
doing a budget,
Yep.
we're gonna have to carry all of that.
So your total debt service for all these projects, potentially, in 2024 could be $1,391,000, which is that second in column U.
Including the existing.
Includes existing, includes the beginning of the roads with a principal payment,
So then in
and the
20
first July.
in '25, it still stays, it goes up.
It would
Yeah.
go into 1,525,000.
200,000 more.
So the expiring goes into Hinsdale at that time in '25. If we look at how to move it out, so we know where the requirements are gonna be for taxes,
Well, the column U is pretty clear,
Yeah.
Right.
right? Column U is pretty clear on how much the interest would be that particular year, column U.
Right.
Principal and interest, correct.
And that, the next column over, V, shows us what annual change that means.
And our annual change that we've already put into the budget, the proposed budget for this year, is just about at where we would need to be to increase next year. And after that, it gets smaller and smaller.
And just while we're sitting here, there's one other component to the bond issue. When we actually sell the bonds in the market, and let's say we're doing 10 million 8, well, the bidders, in developing the best interest rate, there's 20 coupons, there's 20 different serial maturities, some are premium, some are discount. It's how bonds work. You know, there could be a premium associated with that, so that instead of getting 10 million 850, maybe you get 11 million 5, because of the premium that they're selling at, so that they give that to you to bring down that true interest cost. And that premium you can use in a few different ways. One way is to say, well, we have this $800,000 of premium. We should use it towards debt service on the new bonds, maybe for the next 3 years. So it gives you some flexibility, and you know, bond counsel can get into more of the fun details of how you can do that. But the bottom line is, it provides some flexibility. So, you know, if in those couple of higher years you want to try to level that off, it does provide you that opportunity to do so. Again, it's not something that's going to wipe out the need to increase your budget, but at least
It's like buying a new, it's just redoing your mortgage. You have a little bit of money left over.
In some ways, yes.
That you can use towards the debt service.
In a way, correct. And that's the smart way to use it is for debt service, because it's from the bond. So anyways, just wanted to make that a little.
Once you sell a bond
So this
at a
is
particular
fiscal
rate,
year '24.
and the rate could go up for the next bond,
That's 23.
what if the rate goes down?
If the rate goes down, so when you sell bonds, they have a call feature. So it's basically, consider it the opportunity to refinance.
You have a refinance feature in this.
We will, absolutely, 100%. All 99% of bonds do. The way it works is typically in this market, the bond call is usually about 7 years. So if we sell today, rates stay stable, they go up, they go down, what have you, or the yield curve changes and shorter rates are lower, we will have the opportunity in 7 years, because you have to kind of wait till we get to that point, to refinance that debt. If they go up, you're locked in, so it doesn't matter, but you do have that opportunity to refinance potentially. And we do those all the time, particularly in a low rate environment. Right now, I'm not doing too many, because rates just came up. But yeah, they will have a call feature.
And that's an issue of bonds that would take out the old bonds.
Right. Just basically replace the new with the old.
If you did that reissuing and we went for a lower rated bond, do we have to go through any other legal requirements here, voting on that, changes, anything?
What you end up doing in that instance is you would have to, the Board of Selectmen would have the ability to authorize the issuance of refunding bonds. It would not have to go through the town meeting or referendum process. And once that was in place, and the whole reason behind that is that you were issuing bonds that take out other bonds. So you're not adding to the burden, if you will. So that's what keeps you out of that
Understood.
process.
Thank you.
So that next year, it's going to be all that.
But it smooths it out. Smooths it out over time.
Okay. So Anne Marie mentioned the first principal payment. And Glenn could talk more about this, but per IRS regulations, per state statutes, there's only so much flexibility that they allow you to have when you're doing a bond issue. They don't want you to bond today, skip 10 years of principal, and then start paying and go out 40 years. So we try to tie these things to useful life, which is kind of why we land on 20 years. That's sort of the norm. So let's put term aside. You typically would start paying principal back 12 months after the issue date, which is how we have laid this out here. There's a possibility that if, depending on the circumstance, depending on the budget at that time, you are allowed to skip that first principal. So the interest still should be paid within that first 6-month period. even though you could go to 12, but we're not going to get into that now. But you can skip that first principal payment so that you're really issuing today, your first payment's in 24 months, and then you're paying, over that original 20-year term, which could potentially give you some flexibility in those first year or two if you really needed it. Ideally, we try, not to do that too much because it kicks the can a little bit. It raises your interest rate just a tick. The rating agencies look at it as, well, you're kind of deferring, and maybe that's not so. But it is allowed, and it's not something that is not, it's done pretty regularly. Or we call it the 150% rule, which is something that you're allowed to do where no principal payment after any other preceding principal payment could be more than 150% of that prior one. So let's say you're doing, for fun, a $20 million bond issue.
For fun.
Yeah, $20 million, it's fun, it's a good time. $1 million a year for 20 years. And say, well, we want to reduce that first payment. Well, you can't reduce it to $100,000 and then go, $1.1 million for each remaining. You'd have to keep that first one at like $750,000, and then the rest go up to, $1.2 million, but you can't go anywhere beyond that. So there's some flexibility we have within these numbers, within these structures, to work with, but not a ton. And that's really driven by statute primarily. So,
The other thing I wanted to add in, Matt, is the fact that just because we're seeing these numbers in front of us today, this is not what's being voted on today. The hope is to go ahead and authorize the amount of money to be spent in total, which is really in Glenn's wheelhouse. This is merely here to show you that the amount of money that we've budgeted this coming year is going to well cover all of the upcoming expenses that we have planned, which keeps a flat mill rate in next year, and to project out what the future costs will be associated with this. Obviously, we don't want to move forward with it if we're not comfortable with some of the, and to be honest, hard choices. We've talked about this for a long time. I think we all know that the town's at a point where it needs to decide to invest, or it's going to continue to go along on a shoestring budget when it comes to roads and infrastructure. And this is what the cost of having good infrastructure looks like, unfortunately. But I just wanted to make sure it was very clear. We're not voting on a structure for the bonds tonight. These can be adjusted over time, and we have months to go before we need to lock in a number for that first bond issuance. We just need to ultimately be okay with the amount of money over time that's going to be spent, because that's not really going to change.
And even as the project, say, is approved,
Right.
and we decide, okay, well, this is our original plan. Well, we can get to that point. The market can be totally different. Rates could be much lower, much higher, and we can make adjustments, short-term borrowing, long-term borrowing. All those things can be done literally each time we issue. This is more of just a general idea of kind of where things are and what to expect potentially.
Josh, in the information that you provided us in the resolution, it's 24.7,
Yes,
and it's 24.3 here. What's the diff?
24.3.
Well, the bonding package here says roads, Hinsdale, total 24.3.
That's with interest.
That is the
The
400.
number that you see in the resolution is just the principal amount with gross of any grants, correct?
Or is it with Hinsdale? I don't believe it's with interest. I believe it's 18.3 plus 6 million for Hinsdale.
The 24,327, is that what you're?
24,300,000.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the Hinsdale $6 million bond plus 18.3 million for road and infrastructure. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
That's for the bonds, because that's what we actually expect to borrow. In terms of the authorization, there's 24.7, because that's the amount of money that we expect to borrow plus the amount of money we expect to receive in grants just for the infrastructure. Totally separate numbers.
Yeah, if I can jump in just for a second. That's back where I was saying how this document does two separate things. Where you get the higher number, or that 24.7, that's covering both what you would have borrowed to spend, but also what you're getting in grants or other funds. You still have to appropriate the money. And what we do is we have the bond authorization parallel it, because grants, I mean, I don't know, with the state, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just, it gives you that flexibility in case, let's say, the state didn't do anything to help you. It doesn't mean you have to go out and spend all that money either. I guess what I wanted to also say is that this acts more like a cap rather than a you must do this if this is voted on. That's why I think where you see some of the numbers where we're talking 23 million versus 24 in a little, these are estimated costs, estimated grants. We want to make sure that the dollar figure in the authorization covers all the costs that at this point that we can see being for those projects, because the last thing you'd want to do is say 200,000 short and we've got to go through all the process again. I think that's why we also built in that Board of Selectmen control features on things with regards to where the money goes and whether, on subsequent issues, this isn't all being done out there, we're back in with you guys. So I think the thing is that's why I think you're seeing differences in numbers there.
And I just want to add one thing. It's interesting because 24 just pops up a lot. In this particular, 24 million is the gross authorization, which is grants and the amount you're going to need to bond. But then when the grants is around 6 million, and Hinsdale's 6 million, so that's why it just kind of looks like it's kind of confusing because it just happens to pop up. And total roads is 24 million principal and interest, which is a totally different thing. So we have 24 must be the lucky number of the town,
There you go.
or unlucky.
6 million's already approved.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, we've
exactly.
already, that was a
Right,
bond
right.
issue that was already.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would point out is that in that authorization with regards to when the town does get grant money, or I always say other funds because you never know where it might come from, that takes off from the bond authorization, because again, like I was saying, you can't overlap, you can't do it twice. So the thing is if you get money in, your ability to borrow goes down. So it's not an open book, if you will.
I think one of the things here that I would like to have seen separate is Hinsdale separate from this, because I know that you're gonna go bond together because of the interest rates and how bonding works. But for the discussions right now of introducing this to the community in terms of costs and whatnot, we've already done the Hinsdale approvals, as Candace just said, and all that is already on the table, and that's something that is for the actual bonding. But the decision right now is about the roads
Right.
and the infrastructure, and I think all this is now.
And if I could just, that would be column R.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Okay.
that
Okay.
from a-
Well,
from
Katie,
a-
in the resolution, there is no mention of the Hinsdale bond.
No, there isn't.
You know.
The resolution's clear.
So, I get that, Jack, but, we sit up here and we see all these things, and there are concerns from the audience, there's concerns in the community, and I just would like to see it, like, we got it all here together, and we can separate it out because we've known what that is, but I don't see the clarity for everybody else to see this. I'm sorry, but I'm just looking at all these things, and I'm just.
Well, are you suggesting that 24/7 is not the appropriate number to be used?
Well, no, the 24/7 is the appropriate number for the roads, and then we have to look over in the other column with the totals over there. And, because I think when we go to do this budget, questions after this presentation, we go to the next step in the budgets, I think that's when we all have to start thinking about this in relation to this budget and how it sets up next year and the year after.
A quick counterpoint, Candy. I think the reason why we asked for the holistic view of all of our debt was to make sure that the Board of Selectmen didn't have in any way an inaccurate view or didn't have a misleading view of what our total debt costs were going to look like. I don't want any questions to be out there about what total debt service will be possibly just a few years from now. So that's why we presented this all together, and I do think that column R shows, just as we talked about in our different meetings, there's 1 year with this projection where that number hits the $1.4 million bond cost that we talked about. Everything else is less than that for the road bond. So in terms of our original projections, those were very conservative. the projections that we're seeing now with the way that the market is, with the way that we project it's going to go, even taking a conservative projection from Matt, I think we're in better shape than we even thought we were in.
I don't know, I think the numbers that I'm seeing, Candy, are pretty acceptable and understood from the initial conversations that we've had on this for the past several months. The 24/7 is the total of the project, 18.3, plus all of the interest,
That's
correct?
No, sorry, the 24.7 is the entirety of the project plus the grants that we project to
Plus
get
the
on
grants,
top of that.
okay.
That's
I
right.
think that's very confusing. Usually when you hear grants, you subtract. You subtract, but here we're adding that to our bond.
Well,
We're
no,
not
no, let
adding
me-
it to our bond, but to the bond amount. That's,
And actually, Glenn, if I may, I just want to make sure it's clear. Since the very beginning of this, we have talked about the fact that there's that 18.3 number.
Right.
And on top of that, we've talked about the fact that there are millions of dollars of grants that we expect to get. Right. So when you add the 18.3 plus the grants, the whole cost we've been talking about since the beginning has been in the $23-24 million range.
but I guess I can't get past that. With grants, you usually subtract.
Well, what he's saying is you have to have it in there so that
Yeah.
it doesn't look like we're double dipping.
I got that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, we're just borrowing the 18 million plus interest.
Right.
So when you look at 24 million, people are gonna think that we're borrowing 24 million
Yeah.
plus interest. But
That-
we're not, we're borrowing 18 million plus interest. And I think that's where
Yeah.
the documents, in terms of clarity for people that look at things, have to be able to see that separation out.
Well, I think that's part of how we market it. We've been talking 18.3 since we've been making presentations.
Yep.
That hasn't changed. We've been talking about the three major projects of that 18.3, and now we're just asking for approval of that continuation, but we're using a 24/7 dollar figure because council says that you have to include these extra monies in there.
You have, again, if we go back to where I was saying that there's two functions of this document. And again, the appropriation, whether it comes from bonds, whether it comes from money in your general fund, whether it comes from grant money, you have to appropriate it. So you've got to do that on the one side, regardless of where the money's coming from. We authorize the same amount in bonds because grants can be a moving figure. I mean, you right now are anticipating grants, and any bonds that you would issue would be net of grants. That's just the federal tax law. You can't do that. So the thing is, you know, that's a hard stop. There is no way that happens where you're gonna, again, I think double dip is the right phrase. You're not allowed to do that. You legally can't do that. But the whole point being with the dollar amount there is grants are, you think of them as legislative fiat, if you will. They can give them, they can take them back. And what happens if what we think today, and we've got, you know, we're using all the best information that we have at this time. What happens if something changes and the grants don't go there, and you choose that you want to continue to do that portion of the project that the grants would have funded? Now you have no means if we were cut short, now you have no means to back that appropriation. So what's there is, it's just to give you the flexibility that if that were to happen, you don't have to go back out and get approved again. And again, my job is not to let you borrow more than you need, and that's what we've been talking about here.
And the documents that Glenn's put together very specifically say that the Board of Selectmen has to authorize any additional bond that goes out. So every time there's a bond on the schedule, or if there had to be an additional bond because grants didn't come in, this board would have to come together, and all the people in the audience would be able to come back out and give their opinion on should they or should they not be doing this? So I think that's a great mechanism. I think Candy had actually brought that up at one of our meetings to put that in, and it is in there. I hope that answers some questions.
Josh, I think it would make sense to try to, and I know we have a little bit, but I still think there's some confusion to walk between the resolution dollars and then to walk it through to this document, because that's where I think there's some confusion, because they all come out to be 24 million something.
Right.
So if we can
If
start
we-
with the gross number
Yeah.
and then walk it through to the debt schedule would make sense, so that everybody understands what different $24 million that you're talking about.
It comes up a lot, the 24.
Yes.
It does become confusing.
Before you do that, can I just ask some questions about your document? So in 2023, so June 30th, 2023, means the end of this budget proposal, correct?
It means fiscal, yes.
So in this budget proposal right now, I can find the $392,000 for the 2008 bond, which, by the way, was some things down at the recreational fields and upgrades and whatnot down in that area, by the way. And so I can find that. Where do I find the 162,750?
That is part of the initial
400,000.
400,000.
So that's part of the 400?
Correct.
Yeah.
All right, so if I take this, so 16750. It's part of that. So that would leave at the end of the year 200,000, right? So then we go into 2024. We're still paying the 388, correct, for the outstanding 2008 bond in 2024? So when we're sitting here next year, we still will have that 388 in the budget, correct? Okay, we will add to that the 859, 863.
Yes.
We will add to that the 38,000. We will add to that the 97,000.
Correct.
So we will have payments of 1,391,349
That's what it says in column U.
in column U.
Including the existing debt, yes.
Okay, so if we take out the existing debt of 388, we will have $1 million in
The
next year when we're sitting here.
Potentially the 995,550 under the total.
Right, so total,
proposed,
so,
including Hinsdale.
right, so about $1 million, of which we will be carrying over 200,000 at the moment.
Correct.
Unless
With
we
the
up-
town manager's proposed budget.
Right, the 200, plus if we add that other, then we're carrying 350 of that. So we would be facing a $645,000 in an increase. Right?
Where are you getting that?
That's 600 if you do the math all the way up.
Yeah. So this current year, we're putting, right now, in the current budget that we're gonna be talking about, and because I think this is what matters, is we have $400,000 right now in infrastructure bond monies, right? That we're paying forward. So that's gonna go into the top line there. The 162,750 is gonna come from that 400. And so 400 of that, there'll be probably 200 to roll over into the following year's budget, unless it goes somewhere else before that, but it'll roll over. So as long as nothing goes down out of our revenue, that 400 will be there to pay off the following year, the 995,550. Will help pay that off. And then the following year, the 388 from the current bond won't need to be paid, but Hinsdale jumps to 490, but the 388 pays most of that.
And we
So
always
there's-
anticipated that.
Right. So in the current budget, I think that when we look at things, one of the things I'm gonna be looking at is to prepay so that we have some of that money to smooth it more out, even more than it already is. So there will be in 2025, will be, well, actually, 2027 will be the biggest hit.
And again, this is anticipating as their projection is. Things could be different.
As long as there's growth.
I guess I'm kind of leaning, where are you heading on this? What's your point?
The point is she's gonna cut more out of the budget.
Do you think we need to, Josh?
That depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to invest more in the town and do it in from my perspective, what I think is a very sensible manner, I don't think we need to cut more from this year's budget. I think we need to be careful going forward. I think we need to think very carefully, and we need to look to some premium money to possibly help smooth some things out in the next couple of years. I think that the moves that we've already made to help prepay some money for next year will go a long way, and that is thanks to the recommendations that largely Candy's put forward at prior meetings. But to do so on a greater extent at this point in time, first of all, it's speculative. Given the market, it's speculative. Given the fact that we don't know what revaluation is going to do to us, and so forth. I think that we're putting a reasonable amount aside. I think that we are leaving, and one of the reasons we're leaving more of our fund balance in place this coming year is because we know that there are going to be a couple hard years ahead. So we've left more in there that we can rely upon if we need to. I know that our bond advisors might not want to hear this, but we have these resources at our disposal. And I think that we need to use our resources, put the money to work, as we've said a number of times here, to be able to push this program forward. We've been talking about this for months, and I think we've known for months that there's an amount of money that needs to go into this. And we've also made sure the public understands. I think the number we put out there in the Winchester Wire, the newsletter that went out to everybody to try and explain a lot of this, is about $500,000. And I think we're all hoping that we can try and keep it to a no-mill increase. But to just keep cutting a budget this year because we're worried there might be a possible slight mill rate change next year seems a little premature from my
But
perspective.
are you talking about cutting or moving money in the budget?
It amounts to the same at a certain point.
All right, because I think we should move money.
Okay.
I think the bottom line can remain the same in the current budget, but we need to move some money. I think to smooth this out going forward.
You know, every time you speculate on what it might cost more years from now, we could also speculate in the fact that maybe the grand list will have risen that much to pay for that. If we continue with the developments that we're trying to do, we've got to see some improvement in the grand list, and therefore the opportunity to grow and not add more taxes is still there. And when we speculate on what it's going to cost 3, 5, 7 years from now, you can also speculate we've got more money. Town has more money, income coming. We could.
It's possible.
Yeah, we could speculate either way.
It's possible, but I don't think that we're gonna find $1.5 million in 2025. $1.5 million. Right now, as it sits, over a $2 million increase, if we're not careful right now. And we don't have big grand list growth.
That would be
So I'm very.
that would be in 25.
Right, and next year it's gonna be part of that too. You're gonna have $500,000 to carry next year.
And over the last 6 years, we haven't had any.
Well,
Sometimes you have
Over the last 5 years, we've had growth and we've put it into the budget and we've spent it.
on good things.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's gone forward to costs. You know, but it doesn't mean that certain properties haven't had to pay more when you're revalued at more. It doesn't mean that people this year with their cars aren't gonna have to pay more. You know, it doesn't mean that. So I'm just wanting to look at all this because I wanna be very conservative with how we go out with things because they're all interrelated. So, I mean, it's gonna ultimately end up to be what the people decide in terms of whether they want to move forward with the roads and the other infrastructure projects and the truck. You know, because when we get out there, if people decline to do this bond, then we'll have to go back and decide how our roads will get fixed, especially the big, long ones that are $1.5 million roads or $1 million roads. Because you do them, as some people know, you do one of those roads in a year, you're not doing anything else.
That's
Or you don't do that road, and you do all the small things you've been doing, or the small projects, or the projects that take multi-years, like Marshall Lake Road, that's had drainage and now it's waiting to be paved. So we all know that. So it's making decisions, and I think in the budget to help smooth it out as we go forward. So when I look at all this, and then I also worry about the confusion on the bond. I mean, I've been long enough listening to all the stuff that happens, is so we do need to try to find a way that, here's the road package, here's what it's gonna be, right? Hinsdale and bonding is for us, you know, and for us to know that that's how it works in the technical thing. But here's what the road package is gonna cost you, this is what's gonna happen.
Can I address, that was, I think, Anne Marie's point earlier. Can I take a quick stab at addressing that? Just because I think I could put us down a very clear path in a very short period of time, which might be helpful. So the roads, we're looking at 24.7 in the resolution, right? So 24.7. We're expecting 6.4 of grants, so there's your subtraction.
Yeah.
So then we end up with 18.3, which is on this little thing, the three greens are the road bonds, 18.3. So we have 18.3 of bonds that we're gonna need to issue, again, subject to change, whatever, but just assuming that that's all right. 18.3 of bonds issued over a period of 3 different bond issues. We get to column R in this scenario, and you're paying $24,327,000 in interest in total. Again, the 24s pop up all the time, but if we're borrowing 18.3 with these rates and these terms, et cetera, we're borrowing, we're gonna pay back $24,327,000. That has nothing to do with Hinsdale, that has nothing to do with your existing debt, that's just the roads, that's it. Now, of course, when you put that in with Hinsdale and the others, then you come to that column U, which is all encompassing, but that's the roads. So, hopefully that's,
Thank you.
you're
And
welcome.
that 24 that you just said is over a
Which
20-year
24?
period.
Which 24?
The
The 24,327
Yeah.
is over the 20
20-year
years.
period.
22 years, really, because it's multiple.
It's
Yeah.
an interest.
Just to clarify, that's not interest, that's not just interest, that's principal.
Oh, sure, of course, yeah, that's the principal interest.
Because you said just interest.
Yeah, you know, 24,327 is principal and
Total
interest.
cost, yeah.
That's, you're all in. Correct.
Yep.
So the process, Josh, from here?
The process, well, it depends in what order, I suppose, the board wants to take this, but there is a motion that's in front of you. I'm guessing, Glenn, that you'd recommend that that motion be read in its entirety as it's been presented to the board. There is a version of these documents that's been presented to you. I wrote in the upper right-hand corner, updated for 1822, so that you see the most up-to-date version of these documents. That's what we're working with. The whole motion would have to be read into the record. And that would act on, it's very all-encompassing. It acts on the resolution that's attached. It also sets a date for a special town meeting, and also makes an 824 referral.
Yeah, I'll jump in. It's one item of 4, call it resolutions, that make up the one encompassing resolution. What the first one does is it's approving the projects as we've discussed them here tonight. The second thing that it does is it says that it's going to set the town meeting, and it's also going to set the referendum date with it. That's where the notice of referendum that follows those resolutions is there. We're talking May 24th for the special town meeting, and May 28th for the referendum vote. Then the third resolution, or the further resolve, is sending the projects to planning for an 824 review. That's required by state statute. Municipalities are not allowed to spend money on municipal projects until that 824 review is done. It can be done before, it can be done after. Usually we like to get it done and get it out of the way as quickly as we can. Generally, if the project, the acquisition of equipment, so the fire truck element would not go for an 824. The roads where we might be expanding roads, widening them a little, or maybe putting in sewers, or whatever the project may be, that has to conform with the municipal plan. So that's going to require an 824 review. And then finally, the last paragraph, what it does, and I think this will go to help with regards to the clarity that we were talking about, is that the town clerk's office, pursuant to statute, when you've set a referendum date, is permitted to produce what they call explanatory text. Explanatory text comes with one limitation. It cannot advocate for or against, but you can explain everything that the resolution would do. What it's looking to accomplish project-wise, what it could cost the town, and that's where we can say, subject net of grants, we would not borrow having grants, and that would be made available to the public. So those would be what the 4 items do.
And so in terms of order, Candy, this could be acted on first, and then we can move on to the budget, or we could do that in reverse order, and we could talk about the budget first, and then we can move on to the resolution.
No, but we have to do 2 things in this resolution, right? We have to do 2 things tonight?
3 things, 4 things.
It's actually 4 altogether, but they're usually kind of like a bang, bang, bang.
Yeah,
We have to do
it's
4 things tonight?
a
Yes.
single motion that's these 4.
Yes, it's one
Clauses.
Yeah,
resolution,
so the
but
special
4
town meeting,
results.
special town meeting, if I remember before, it's just to explain things, it doesn't stop it from going to referendum.
Correct. Under state statute, the way a town government, the way Winchester is set up, what the process is that you send it to a town meeting, and then technically, I mean, we say that it's going to be at a referendum. What's actually happening is that you're adjourning that special town meeting to a referendum vote, which is really a continuation of the special town meeting. So that's just really more of a technicality in conforming with statute.
Right, so basically, if we send this tonight, we're sending it to referendum.
Yes,
Yes.
because pursuant to the charter, we couldn't do just a town meeting anyway. It has to go to referendum.
Right, so, just so we understand that if we
Yes.
do this, it's all going. So where in here does it say that subsequent approvals of rolling money, is that?
Paragraph 4.
Paragraph four?
Last sentence of paragraph 4. After the initial issuance of bonds, any additional bonds issued pursuant to this resolution shall be subject to the approval by a vote of the Board of Selectmen. And again, that's that control we were talking about, and I think you had requested.
Yeah, well, we all talked about it as a board.
And
That
this
was
was-
a global you.
When this resolution is read, you've got 7 points here on this.
You can,
Do we have to
there's,
read all 7, or can we
no,
just?
no. What you can do is, if you go to the next page after it, if you've got I've got resolutions where,
It has the town meeting and the referendum up top.
So if you
that's the last page. I don't, can I see
That's
what
the
you have? Because I don't.
Yep, and then that authorizes,
One thing and not be correct.
that authorizes the resolution on
And
the
then
prior
this-
page, and then it authorizes the special town meeting notice.
This is the resolution.
That's where you're approving.
Yeah, so resolution of the board until it ends with
It
the
all
stuff
needs
on
to be
the next
read
page.
in.
Yes, please.
So starting on the 3rd page in the middle, all the way to the 4th page.
That's
Yes, please.
So that's- And then after that, we would set the town meeting date?
Yes, because what you would be doing is
A
by,
second motion?
it's the further resolved. So what you would actually do is say the resolution, and then it would read it, it's resolved, further resolved, further resolved, further resolved. Take a motion to consider it, second it, and then you would vote on those items all as one package.
Right, and as part of that approval, if everybody is looking, this is the 5th page. It says notice of special town meeting Tuesday, May 24th. The motion that you're about to make, if you choose to move forward with it, authorizes Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 as the special town meeting date because you're authorizing this notice. So it all works together. That's the only motion that needs to be made. There's no separate motion that needs to be made for the special town meeting date.
Okay, so this paragraph on the back of page 4, which says 2 at the top.
Yep.
And what
That's
you,
reflected in the notice of special town meeting referendum presented to this meeting.
right, what would be in the minutes would be that resolution that we've kind of said, the 4-part resolution. And then what you would also include is that resolution that we've all been discussing on the front, the 7-section item, as well as the notice of the town meeting and the referendum. So those items would all be part of that, I guess, that minutes document when all is said and done.
Just a clarification question here. Where it says further resolve that in his discretion, the town clerk is authorized to prepare, we can assist him, or he can
Yes.
accept our assistance or not, correct? Is that what that means?
That is a statutory requirement that it's the town clerk's province to produce the explanatory text. It does not mean he can't get help from everybody here.
Good luck.
But I think what we've done in the past is to be very clear about it, is we've had either our town attorney help us.
I would
bond
suggest the
counsel.
town attorney
We've done
as
it
well
for
as
charters.
bond
We've done it for
counsel.
charters and everything.
Because what we can do is, I've got 5 colleagues that are all well-versed in this. We would give it a look-see to make sure that we were all good with things beforehand. And if there was anything questionable, I don't want to say we have friends, we have people we know who are at the Elections Commission for the state that we can make sure that you're not in any trouble with what's in there.
So glad you got assistance there.
Duly noted. Just a minor point, if we accept this, aren't we in effect establishing a referendum date of Saturday the 28th, when really isn't it the job of the annual town budget meeting to set the referendum date? It could set a date different than May 28th.
If we could, then we'd have to have 2 of them.
Just wanted to point that out.
Well, that's what we did last year with the water bonds. Remember the water
Yes.
bonds went out last year?
Under statute, the Board of Selectmen has the ability to forego that town meeting determination of a referendum, and you can send it directly to referendum. That's why that ability is there.
But in our charter, we have our meeting for the annual budget on May 9th, which gets set that, May 9th. The body, the annual town meeting body, will send it to the referendum date.
Oh, and that's consistent with other parts of this. I don't want to get, I'll
Right,
just
so-
confuse everything if
So
I.
basically, what's happened is because over the years, everybody's wanted that Saturday, and we have 21, I believe is it 21 to 28, or 14 to 21? 21 to 28 days after the annual town meeting, it has to go. So everything has to fall within it, and everybody in town usually likes it on a Saturday, because they don't want to leave anybody out.
Okay.
So that's why the 28th here is matched up, is because it's the most likely date for us to have it. But if for some reason the town meeting goes wild and decides to do it on a different date, then we will have 2 votes. I would imagine, right?
I'd have to.
Well, we could further explain why we have to have it on the 28th.
Right, because if we say, set this date now, it's set that date now. Otherwise,
We
we'd
would
have to,
have to re-meet to reset another
Yeah.
date.
which could throw everything off in terms of timelines.
Correct.
Well, let us have faith.
And you brought it up.
I did.
All right, does anybody want to read it, or you want more time? We could go to another time this week. Yeah.
1 page, 4 paragraphs? That's the page, that's what you
That's
want
it.
resolved,
Yes,
right?
please.
Before we go, is everybody here ready? Everybody okay? Everybody all right?
All right, so we started off with a motion. We have to-
Yes, a motion.
What's the preferable words? It just says resolve. Motion.
A motion for the following resolution,
Okay.
and then read the form.
I'd like to make a motion for the following resolution. Resolve that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Winchester hereby adopts the resolution presented to this meeting approving an appropriation of $24,700,000 for costs related to capital improvement projects consisting of, 1, repairs and improvements to various town roadways identified in the initial section of roads for 5-year capital plan dated January 18th, 2022, prepared by the Public Works Department and on file in the Office of the Public Works Department, consisting of milling and removing of waste material, paving and materials, installation of manholes and drainage, risers, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel, and related costs. 2, repair and improvements to various sidewalks consisting of demolition and removal of waste material, installation of new materials, and related costs. 3, repairs and improvements to the drainage system along Highland Lake consisting of demolition and removal of waste material, acquisition and installation of piping, collection basins, and other materials, traffic protection, including signage and police and flag personnel, and related costs. And 4, acquisition and equipping of an aerial ladder, truck, or other apparatus for the fire department. As necessary and appropriate, the appropriations may be spent for design, demolition, and construction cost, equipment, material, utilities, site improvement, survey cost, architect fees, engineering fees, and other consultants' fees, legal fees, net temporary interest and other financing costs, and other expense related to the respective projects, and approving the authorization of $24,700,000 bonds and notes to finance the appropriation. A copy of the resolution shall be attached to the minutes of this meeting and made a part thereof. Further resolve that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Winchester hereby approve the setting of the dates for a special town meeting and referendum to act on the appropriation and borrowing authorization approved above, as reflected in the notice of such special town meeting and referendum presented to this meeting, which notice, to the extent of its reference to the aforesaid appropriation and borrowing authorization, is hereby approved. A copy of the notice shall be attached to the minutes of this meeting and made a part thereof. Further resolved, that said projects be referred to the Planning and Zoning Commission as appropriate for the report pursuant to Section 8-24 of the Connecticut General Statutes. Further resolved, that in his discretion, the town clerk is authorized to prepare and distribute a concise explanatory text regarding the referendum question on the appropriation and borrowing authorization approved above, and that, in his discretion, the town manager is authorized to prepare and distribute additional explanatory material regarding such questions, such texts, and explanatory material to be subject to the approval of the town attorney, and to be prepared and distributed in accordance with Section 9-369B of the General Statute of Connecticut, Revision 1958, as amended.
I'll second that motion.
Is there anything else we need in it?
Just approval or not?
All right, so I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor of the resolution? Okay, that's unanimous. So this will be going to a town meeting on May 24th, and will adjourn to referendum on Saturday, May 28th. Josh, can you get all of this up on the website
Yes, tomorrow, first thing.
under the infrastructure piece?
Yep.
And we don't need to do anything about the notice of a special town meeting.
What's going to happen is that will be published in a newspaper having general circulation. It will be posted on the town's website, and it will be posted on what used to be the Post, but that's in the building here by the town clerk's office. And that will be done next week.
No later than April 27th is my
I would
understanding.
prefer the 26th, but you got to the 27th.
Understood.
And maybe the four of you can work together on a little, like, clarification of how this is presented.
Absolutely. And with regards to the explanatory text, again, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Absolutely, thank you. You had mentioned something about the explanatory text cannot favor or oppose. It just needs to be a straightforward, objective text.
Correct. It has to be neutral in what it says and the tenor that it takes.
So this is going to be published in its entirety in a newspaper. We have the ability, according to ours, not to publish in its entirety, but this one will be published in its entirety.
When you say published, the resolution or the notice?
I guess the resolution,
We
no,
are-
the notice
The notice,
has to be per state statutes, or, we have.
I tried to shrink it down. I can take a look into if there's a shorter form, but at this point, yes.
Just want to be clear about that.
What do you see, putting in a newspaper?
Yes,
Which one?
pardon?
Which one?
So this whole thing?
I'm not
this-
saying
This is
Amy.
like a $3,000 newspaper ad.
We don't need to put that in a newspaper.
Yeah, you just.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do.
We do. That's what we're
You can-
discussing.
Not our ordinance changes, but this.
What I would suggest is that if you've got it's the way the statute reads, it's a newspaper having a general circulation in the town. That does not mean it has to be the Hartford Current or
Oh, no,
the
I'm
major
only
one.
bringing it up because we had an ordinance change where we wouldn't have to publish the full legal
Okay.
notice. So in this case, this is going to be the full.
I just wanted to make sure that you all know that it doesn't have to go to the most expensive paper either. It's just one that gets circulated.
They're all the same.
Yeah,
And so,
Limited circulation.
so the text, most of the text would come from this paragraph.
Yes. That notice that's attached to it is the format for the posting.
I'll verify before it gets published
That's perfect.
with you when we get a proof.
Again, any point in the process, please call me.
Thank you.
Okay, then, thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for your help.
So, we could go to the budget, or Josh asked me if we wanted to take and have have Tim from the Housatonic area conservation go next about the 1,200 acres of conservation easements around Crystal Lake.
Acreage.
Okay, you're up, Tim. We're
Get
doing
visitors
C,
out.
we'll come back to A.
Before Tim jumps in, I do just want to make sure it's listed in the background information, but I was at the meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission where they conducted the 824 review of this proposal. As you'll recall, this was brought before the Selectmen a number of months ago, and since then it's gone through that 824 review. It came back unanimously positive with a hope that this moves forward, so
There's also a FAQ.
yes.
There's a FAQ that was prepared, and I think, Tim, you had some help in that.
Yes, I did.
Yes, and so both the minutes of that meeting where Tim was able to present and that 824 referral was conducted, as well as the Q&A are attached.
Well, one of the things I think is important to do is to do what was in that the FAQ, because I've seen comments not understanding what's happening with it, so.
Sure. And thank you very much for your time. Again, I'm Tim Abbott. I work for the Housatonic Valley Association, and for the last, I would say, almost going on 3 years, have been having exploratory conversations with Jim Rollins, with your prior town manager, and with Josh about this conservation opportunity and revenue generation for your Department of Public Works. So I guess I instigated this project, but I'm also very happy to help answer any questions you may have.
Josh, could I ask you to just go through the FAQs for...
Sure, just for the edification of everybody in the room, the selectmen, anybody who watches this later, absolutely. So I'll just read through the questions and answers as they come up. The first is, what is the opportunity for the town of Winchester regarding the conservation easement of plus or minus 1,200 acres of town-owned land? The answer that we've provided, that really Tim provided, along with Jen Perga wrote this, had a hand in writing this as well. Residents of the town of Winchester will have the opportunity to vote to permanently protect the land surrounding Winstead's drinking water reservoirs to ensure clean drinking water, and the town will receive $750,000 for doing so. The next question, will the town of Winchester still own the 1,200 acres of land? The answer, yes. The town will still own the land. It will still be able to operate the water utility and manage its forests responsibly. The next question, what is a conservation easement? In simple terms, a conservation easement means that the land cannot be developed with homes or other structures in the future in order to protect its conservation values, such as clean drinking water and wildlife habitat. In this case, the state of Connecticut will hold the easement and ensure that the terms of the easement continue to apply to the property for this owner and for any future owners of the land. The next question, where does the $750,000 come from? The answer, the Highlands Conservation Act Grant Program, a federal program, will fund $442,500. Private funding raised by the Housatonic Valley Association will match the $442,000 with an additional $307,500. The purchase price was determined by an appraisal of the property with and without conservation easements in place. Because most of the land is either Class 1 or Class 2 water company land, it has very limited development potential as it currently stands. The Highlands Conservation Act of 2004 provides funding to protect drinking water supplies in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And there's a link that we've provided in the FAQ, which we'll make sure is circulated, that helps answer some questions and shows you some information about that fund. The next question, where will the $750,000 go? The Sewer and Water Commission will use the $750,000 to help fund the upcoming infrastructure costs, including dam repair, routine and preventative maintenance, and a forest management plan. In essence, the grant money helps to offset future rate costs for sewer and water users. Will the town of Winchester and Sewer and Water Commission still be able to run the filtration plant, maintain reservoirs, and other infrastructure? Yes, the Sewer and Water Commission will be able to maintain any and all equipment and infrastructure on the property. Additionally, 40 acres has been set aside near the water filtration plant to account for any future structures or expansions that may be needed. The next question, will the easement allow Sewer and Water Commission to manage its forests? Yes, subject to a forest stewardship plan prepared by a licensed forester that protects water quality and sensitive habitats. Next question, do citizens have access to this land now for hunting, fishing, hiking, or other types of recreation? No, this land is not open to the public as it currently stands. However, Crystal Lake is open on one day for an ice fishing derby, during which funds are raised for a paid internship and scholarship in honor of James McCarthy, who worked for many years at the water filtration plant. Then the last question, will the land be open to the public when a conservation easement is placed on the land? Yes and no. The majority of the land will still be off limits. In the western portion, however, the Water and Sewer Commission plans to create a walking trail on land already preserved by the state of Connecticut, Winchester Land Trust, and 1 or 2 parcels of the 1,200 town-owned acres. The trail would be sited to avoid impacting drinking water quality or sensitive habitat. I feel this is very thoroughly done. I really appreciate the time and the effort that you put into this, obviously not just in this document, but everything that came before.
That's my pleasure, and I'm happy to expand on any of those questions or other questions that you might have.
Can you just expand a little bit on the Housatonic Act, the drinking
On the Highlands Conservation Act?
Yeah.
Sure. In 2004, Congress federally recognized portions of 4 states within what's called the Highlands region. And it's essentially lands that are close to larger, denser populations in metropolitan New York, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, and here in Northwest Connecticut. The impetus behind it was to recognize that there are large areas of forest land and drinking water land that are quite close to those populations that they rely on for clean air, clean water, peaceful recreation, and also agricultural and wildlife values. It's federal money that comes to the state to buy conservation interest in qualified property. That could be the state acquiring something for itself, or it could be the state, in this case, acquiring a conservation easement. And it pays for 50% of the value of that easement. So the $442,500 number is actually 50% of the appraised value. The $750,000 figure is the agreed upon sale price, largely because I have to raise the remainder, and I don't think I can do more than $307,500. So you're making a contribution of a discounted sale on this, not for the full, what would it be, $885, but for $750. And then the property has already pre-qualified for this funding. The funding exists with no obligation to the town, but with your encouragement to see if it could be eligible. I helped the state of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection apply for a competitive slice of that funding. This property scored higher than any of the other 3 states, and it has ample funding for this need. In other words, that 442.5 is there. It goes away on January 31st, 2024, which would be our closing date. So that's also my drop dead raise the remainder date. It's why I'm hoping that you will decide this is a good idea for the town and put it before the voters, because I can start fundraising the day after they say it's a good idea. It means that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the source of the grant money. State of Connecticut holds the easement. The terms that were described in the frequently asked questions apply specifically to your property as well as to most other Highlands ones. Because you have a water company, the provision of clean, safe drinking water and the ability to use it that way is a retained right. And likewise, to responsibly manage the forest with sensitivity to water quality and sensitive habitats is a retained right. You get to do that in the future. I would like to commend Jim Rollins and his team for thinking about ways of providing appropriate public access on a sensitive property like that, and a connecting trail that's sited away from those habitats is a wonderful way of doing that, and that is a requirement from DEEP's side of Highlands funding. They want the public to have some way of experiencing it. And so the creativity there, without compromising your asset, I think is terrific. I would also say that the Highlands Conservation Act also supports other projects in your town. The Winchester Land Trust has received funding not only through the state open space grant program for projects, but has gotten Highlands easements on top of it. So there's experience with what that looks like and how it behaves that you have locally. And I'm just deeply involved in making sure those funds come to communities in this area. So I spend a lot of my time on it.
Great. Jim, Crystal Lake water during the spring when it's running over goes into Highland Lake, right? Which is one of our major assets, and then after it goes into the lake, it goes down through the Mad River and into the Still River and then into the wild and scenic Farmington, correct?
Yes. You have 2 amazing reservoirs. They also have around them large areas of contiguous forest land. So it's part of a landscape that is filtering lots of water, that is providing lots of wildlife habitat, that is likely to withstand the larger storms that we may experience with a changing climate. It's an intact area. And there's good conservation, as your town manager alluded to before, around that property. Both some flood control areas that you're well aware of on the Mad River, but also adjacent Winchester Land Trust properties. So there's a nice block of land that in the future is going to be forested and rivers and public drinking water supply reservoirs. And I guess I'd also add that it's a good opportunity to get paid to keep doing what you'd like to do with the land, since it's highly unlikely that you would decide that you would rather develop it and not have it as your water company. So it's a way to generate revenue to support yourself without foregoing what would be a reasonable development option down the road.
If the town meeting approves the easement, conservation easement, but you don't raise the funds and the deadline passes, what happens to that approved conservation easement that has been approved by the town already?
It won't go in place until we produce the full purchase price. So if I fail, if I make a good faith effort and come back and say, I'm sorry, I only got $200,000 to go on top of that, you don't have to do the deal. It's the property you still have unrestricted. I don't plan to fail, so it's a good place, faith effort. But the step that would happen if the town voters approved is still a process of a purchase and sale agreement with the state that has the caveat that Tim Abbott and the Houstonic Valley Association make a good faith effort to match that funding. That also has the condition that the acreage is determined by survey. So if it turns out there's more acres, the amount, the value might be more. If it turns out there's less, the value might be less. The purchase price is still $750,000 right now, but if there's a massive variance, we could talk about it. But you're not on the hook to do it if we can't deliver the purchase price. I would also say that HVA has already put, about $7,000 into a $14,000 appraisal just to make sure we knew what it was. And that I'm also providing free of charge, if this is approved, the baseline documentation report that goes with the easement to document this is what the property looks like now. These are its conservation values. So if 40 years from now something dramatic has changed, everybody has a common understanding of what it was supposed to be. And those, that has value. So I'm doing that as well.
So the process for this is if we think that this is in the best interest of the town, that we would send it to a town meeting. I think Josh has it in the language before you, but you gotta change the date to May 16th. May 9th is the annual town meeting for the budget. So if somebody's gonna make the motion for this, May 16th. Somebody like to make that
I'll
motion?
make it. Nobody else will.
I don't have it in front of me, so.
Hmm?
I don't have it in front of me, so.
I move that the Board of Selectmen refer the matter of, that's the one we want to go, selling conservation easement around Crystal Lake and Rug Brook Reservoir to the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to the annual town meeting to be held.
No.
No, to a regular Board of Select,
Just a town meeting.
to a town meeting. It's not the town
It
meeting.
was my mistake.
Oh, it shouldn't be annual town
Yeah,
meeting?
we're gonna have it at a regular Board of Selectmen meeting on the 16th.
Ah,
So just a town meeting to be held 7 PM, Monday, May 16th, 2022.
May 16th.
Yep,
Okay, so we're changing this?
my apologies.
Okay.
Yep.
You want me to redo it?
Yes, please.
I move that the Board of Selectmen refer the matter of selling conservation easement around Crystal Lake and Rug Brook Reservoir to the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection to the Board of Selectmen meeting to be held 7 PM on Monday, May 16th, 2022, where the public will be permitted to,
It's a town meeting, the people
Yes.
here
Yeah, we're setting
decide.
a town.
This is not a Board of Selectmen decision, this will be the town meeting's
where the
decision.
public will be permitted to vote on whether or not to execute this proposal.
Second.
I would add that that's a good date for me. I'm the chair of the North Kane Planning and Zoning Commission, which meets on May 9th, so I'm relieved. If you need me in the audience, I can come.
With
I
all
think
the
it'd be a
dates
good
before
idea.
that are all gonna be our budget dates, so.
No.
It's the first one that comes up that works.
Yep.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, all in favor? Okay, so, May 16th, town meeting, it'll be as part of our meeting, so we'll be in our meeting, we'll, put our meeting on hold and have the town meeting.
Wonderful. If you'd like me here, I'd be happy to be here, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, if there's any questions here.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thanks for your time and thanks for fundraising for something in our town.
Happy to help.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we go back to the budget, 10A. Consider and possibly act on the proposal for the fiscal year 2023 budget and establish a date for the annual town meeting, which is already established. And also too, what we want to do tonight is appoint, if your Debbie Angel has agreed to be the moderator. That's one of our other jobs, is to make sure we appoint the moderator for the annual town budget meeting. So we'll do all that under A, but we don't establish a date for the annual town meeting because it's already established in the charter. Second meeting in May. Second Monday in May. So we have the budget proposal, and in here we have some notes from, I guess Josh has notes for us and updates, so Josh?
Yes, I just want to make sure the board understands. You received 3 different documents related to the budget tonight. The first is a summary page where I've listed for you all of the projected motions that, given conversations that we've had at past meetings, I would expect you to make in relation to the budget. That doesn't mean that's what you have to be making, but those are there for your reference. You have a summary capital improvement sheet, which has been updated since the last time you saw it. And you also have a full FY 22-23 proposed budget document, which again has been updated since we last met at the special meeting. So those 3 documents. First, I'm going to talk about the budget document. As you go through, you're looking really at 3 different columns. There's a, I'll say 2. There's the original town manager's proposed, and there's the selectmen's proposed. Any line item that's seen a change from my original proposed budget to the selectmen's proposed budget has a yellow line through it. So if you're trying to follow along with the changes from March 15th to now, just look for those yellow highlights in the document that you were handed by Anne Marie earlier. All of those changes are outlined in the motions that I've put together for you in the agenda item summary. So as you go through and you make those motions, those are the items that you'll be touching on, is all of those things, all of those line items that are in that yellow highlight. As compared to our last meeting, there are a handful of changes that have been made. Namely, a 200, and this is based on conversations at that special Board of Selectmen meeting, there has been a shift of $200,000 away from town support for education, and that's really going into the capital improvement line to help cover the cost of the of the sidewalk match that's required for the Communities Challenge grant. There is $150,000 that's taken out of the capital improvement plan because I have made a commitment to all of you that I would find a way to fund $150,000 worth of digital radios for the Public Works Department out of the American Rescue Plan Fund. So you'll hear about that at next meeting, but $150,000 is removed from the capital improvement plan. And there is $150,000 that's gone into a new transfer out to debt service fund line. That's a brand new line. Anne Marie can speak to it a little bit more if you so choose, Anne Marie, or if the board would like. But please think of this like the capital improvement plan, the transfer out to the capital fund. This is a fund that would be non-lapsing. This is a fund that once you put $150,000 into it, there would not need to be a reappropriation of that $150,000 next year to be able to spend that money on the Hinsdale bond, which was the intention, I know, when Candy brought it forward at the last meeting, to make sure that we're very well prepared to see some of that money tending to the future bond costs. So those are the key changes that you see from the last time that we met. But in terms of the total, once again, just look for those yellow highlights and look for the bulleted items that fall within the agenda item summary that you've been provided tonight. Overall, the bottom line really doesn't change. It's a flat mill rate, but what's proposed would result in a flat mill rate. And I'm happy to take, along with Anne Marie, any questions that you might have at this time.
Josh, could you speak to the item, the second bullet, the $200,000 decrease in the, nope, wrong one. No, I lost it.
Was it the education?
We're still transferring $200,000 from town support for education into capital?
I apologize if it's a little convoluted, but basically the way that this went is we took 200,000 from town support for education and we put it into capital, and then we took 150 from capital and we put it into the transfer out to debt service. So you see there's a little bit of money moving both in and out of the capital money, but it all equals out. So effectively, there's $200,000 less in the town support for education line with this proposal than there was when we last met.
But this first one, Steve, that you see, the second bullet down on his sheet,
Yes.
you need to explain the education cost sharing grant. You know how you thought
That's
that
right.
the 200,000 in alliance money was being added to last year's ECS money, but
That's
it
right.
wasn't. It's already baked in there. And
Right.
So that's
So-
what that first one's from.
Right. So the second bullet point on the agenda item summary, just like Candy was saying, and I think as you were getting to, Steve, that was a misunderstanding between myself and the superintendent. I had heard that and I had asked the superintendent very, very much up front if she expected any increases in revenues on her side that we needed to include in the budget. She told me that the Alliance grant was no longer being considered to be a separate grant. It was considered to be something that was now part of ECS. So as we looked at the budget, we said, okay, well, that means ECS needs to go up 200,000 and we need to figure out what the other, if an adjustment needs to be made anywhere else. It turns out the superintendent misspoke, and this is a correction. That $200,000 decrease from my proposal to now is a correction. That money has never and still is not baked into or considered to be part of the ECS cost, or rather I should say it already was, and therefore to add it again, to put it back into the ECS money would be to double dip, as we've been talking about a lot tonight. We don't want to do that, so this is a correction to make sure that we have an accurate number of how much we're getting from the Alliance grant and ECS combined.
I'm trying to assess the impact it has on the education budget. Is it a decrease in
This
the
one
overall budget?
Does nothing.
No, it's totally a revenue. It was a miscalculation on my part. We actually, as part of the budget conversations, when we found that out, we'd cut $200,000 off the town side of the budget.
Okay, and the superintendent has a clear understanding of this.
Yes, I've spoken with Nancy in the finance office. I know that she's spoken with Melanie about this, and Melanie and I did go back and forth about this originally. We have an understanding of what the proper number is now, and we know what we're moving forward with.
Because if you look at the bottom line on the last page of this budget, Steve, this is where it goes out to education. There's a $410,827 increase to the MBR line. Board of Education expenditures, 1,100, 1,000, just near the very end of it. Right below that is the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund expenditures of 128,349, which used to be somewhere else. So this ECS line is just revenues that the town has to use to pay this increase over here of $410,000 on the MBR line.
Okay, I think I get it.
This other one is something that we talked about the other day, that is my request of the town support for education line of $200,000. The $285,085 of it comes from, Josh is gonna have to explain this one, is last year's non-lapsing account of $85,000.
Right. So correct me if I'm wrong, Anne Marie, but we've gone through this about 1.5 million times. Basically, what happened last year is that there was $85,000 that was put from the education non-lapsing fund, and that was baked into the town support for education line. So the number that you all saw as being approved was $686,000. The real number of town support for education was $601,000, and the amount of money that was baked into that was $85,000 on top. So it's two different numbers. You have the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund expenditures was $85,000, and then you have the town support for education was $601,000. To try and make that clear going forward so there's no further confusion about what's baked into what, we've now separated those numbers out. So the new request for this year for the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund expenditures is $128,349. That's almost at the bottom of the proposed budget. It's a yellow highlight. And if you go back up about, whereabouts is that?
So they're getting 500.
Page 15 and 16.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're right. And then you look at the town support for education line. Last year, we had put in that $686,000 number. In my misunderstanding of the budget numbers, once again, in my proposal, I put it up to $886. That's $200,000 on top of the $686 that you saw the year before. As we broke that out now, so that you've separated out the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund, we had to subtract the 85 that was in there already from last year so that we could separate out the 128 that's now in there this year. So really, it's 601,000 that would go forward for town support for education this year. That would be level to last year. And then an additional $128,349 in the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund expenditures, which is a slight increase of a few $10,000 in Board of Ed non-lapsing fund to over 85,000. I apologize for the confusion, but going forward, this will be much
I thought
smoother.
at the budget meeting on Board of Education, I asked Melanie what she thought she was gonna have in the non-lapsing fund at the end of the year. I thought she said something like 45,000.
No, that,
Say what? How
I
much?
believe that's the amount of money.
Lapsing fund, I thought, during the budget meeting, the Board of Education, I asked Melanie what was left in the, she had shown something like 95,000 in the non-lapsing. And I said, so you're gonna have $95,000 left over? And she said, no, by that time, we'll only have about 45.
I believe that's the number that she was saying would be left over at the end of this current fiscal year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Sorry, the amount of their operating budget left at the end of
And
this
that would go
fiscal
into
year.
the non-lapsing account.
That's right. So they would be taking more out next year than they project to put in at the end of this coming year.
This 128 they already have, we gave that to them in August.
Yeah.
Remember the 300 and something thousand dollars? We put 200 into one account, and then the rest of it went into the non-lapsing. And the non-lapsing account last year had 400 and something thousand dollars in it, because some of it, I think, is going to air conditioning, maybe?
So every year they have to come back and ask
Right,
us for
right,
that money back. We didn't give it all back to them.
So this isn't from whatever happens in June of this year, this is what happened in June of last year.
So the addition of this line, the non-lapsing fund expenditure, is something we've never seen before, but by having it there now, we will be able to get a complete picture of that.
Some increased transparency.
Thank
Yep.
you.
So we have these adjustments from Josh, so we could start to make motions on this. We just process-wise, we have until Friday to get this out so that there's enough time for the town clerk to do the publishing that needs to be done according to the charter before the annual town meeting. So we could do each of these adjustments, and then if we're done, we could then send the budget total of 35 or 36 million to the town meeting on May 9th. Or if you want to change anything else or look at anything else.
That sounds like a good plan.
So he has them all laid out here, so we could just, we could do them one by one, or we could do them as a package. And then we would make the motion at the bottom, move it to annual town meeting, and then we would just make a separate motion appointing Debbie Angel as the moderator. So whatever you all like to do.
Is the requirement to vote individually on each of these bullet points?
I don't think so. I think as long as we put them all together.
That's what was done last year. I looked back at the minutes, but it's not a requirement.
It's whatever you all want to do as a board.
So I'll make the motion. I move that the Board of Selectmen adopt the following changes to the town manager's originally proposed budget dated March 15th, 2022. A $2,151 decrease to revenue account number 1-000-700-0000, property taxes -current. A $200,000 decrease to revenue account number 1-999-720-0007, Education Cost Sharing, ECS. A $120,000 decrease in revenue account number 1-999-790-0000, fund balance unassigned. A $35,000 decrease in expenditure account number 1-910-804-0000, transfer out other funds, capital improvements. A $285,000 decrease in expenditure account 1-910-804-0001, town support for education. A $150,000 increase in expenditure account 1-913-804-0000, transfer out to debt service fund. An $18,000 decrease in expenditure account 1-911-202-0000, sick and vacation pay accrual. A $262,500 decrease in expenditure account 1-913-302-0009, interest, 2022 infrastructure bond, and a $128,349 increase to expenditure account 1-1000-100-100, BOE non-lapsing fund expenditure, for a total budget of $36,053,374, a 3.33% increase over the full year 2022 budget. And I furthermore move that the annual town meeting be set for Monday, May 9th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at Gilbert School for the purpose of considering this full year 2023 budget proposal.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this? If not, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. I may have a motion for the moderator for the town meeting.
Move we appoint Debbie Angel as moderator for the town meeting.
Thank you. All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. So the town meeting's all set up. It will be held at the Gilbert School, and that's all set up. You guys got that all set up?
Yep, organized. Thank you all.
So moving on in our agenda, A, under new business refunds as recommended by Collector of Revenue, may I have a motion?
I make that motion. I move that the Board of Selectmen authorize the refunds recommended by the Collector of Revenue in the amount of $5,941.41.
Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions? All in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Next one is item B, is a driveway permit variance for 680 East Wakefield Boulevard that Jim has already written to us extensively in there. And because of our charter and the way that we have things, this is something that has to come before us. Josh or Jim?
That's right. Jim, certainly if you'd like to come forward so that you might be able to say a few words on the matter, if a question's posed or you have things to say, please feel free. The matter at hand is at 680 East Wakefield Boulevard, and as Candy already said, given the way that the charter reads and the ordinances read, this is something that must come before you given the grade at the site. So Jim, could you tell us a little bit more about?
Yeah, so this is probably new to some of you. Some of you were here the last time one of these popped up. The driveway ordinance is almost completely dysfunctional, and most of the time, you can find a way to make them meet the ordinance with a little bit of ingenuity. I'll often see a driveway proposed, a driveway application permit where it doesn't necessarily meet all the aspects of the driveway ordinance, but it's a complete just removal and replace of exactly what was there. So I don't typically bring those to you because there's nothing you can do. This is actually changing the grades, and there was some complexity brought up by the Wetlands Commission, even though the area was outside of the regulated area. So it was like, it wasn't just a slam dunk. So because it's a requirement of the ordinance that you bless these changes, everything that's being proposed, and if you have questions for the applicant, Mr. Moreno is here, everything that's being proposed improves an already, tough driveway condition. It improves it as far as the ordinance is concerned, and its usability, and its, how it functions along the, where it meets the edge of the town road. So everything's improved. There's one section, there's like 35-foot section of this driveway where after you come off the road, it drops down steep to get to where it goes. The grade is not changing in that area at all, but it exceeds the 14% maximum that the ordinance allows. Over the course of that 30 or 35 feet, off the top of my head, I think the grade averaged out to 16% with one, 5-foot area that's at 21% or something. Again, it's exactly as it currently exists. It's usable. There's, the way it is, he's actually raised the grade below that to flatten it out before going, coming to a stop. But because it wasn't, because everything wasn't just completely ducks in a pond, I told him he had to submit a letter to you, and since I was here anyway, I was happy to speak on it. So if you've got any questions, I have no problems granting the driveway permit. It's functioning as a driveway now. The situation is only getting better, and I think as long as we have your little endorsement on it, it's that was my only condition of approval.
Will we change ordinance? Will we modify the ordinance going forward so that this could not have to be addressed again?
We could. There's about 20 modifications I'd like to make to that ordinance. The last 7 years, I've just been jotting them all down.
Okay.
How I make all of them jive, that's a whole other story, but yeah.
It's almost like if you say make it ADA compliant, then it would pass.
Yeah, well.
Sounds like the.
That's not gonna happen.
No, I know.
In this town, right? Exactly.
But it's like the Greenway.
Yeah, exactly, right. So, again, I haven't brought one to you in a while because they've all been exact removals and replacements. And when I first brought them to the board several years ago, no one even knew it was in their purview because it was never followed because most driveways in towns don't even come close to the ordinance. So it's kind of a formality, but, again, since wetlands brought it up and there was some changes, and I got in the middle of it, I was gonna be here, we just thought this is an easy way to, make it legal.
I just have a question, and maybe it's more for Paul than anything. At the bottom of your driveway, because you're on the lake side, has wetlands already addressed the runoff?
I will be at my second wetlands meeting on Wednesday night. We have an engineered plan, we're reducing impervious considerably.
But the runoff, the rate of runoff?
Yeah,
Because
we're
I
addressing all of that.
Because I spend a lot of time trying to slow water down on my property, so.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time and money with the engineer to redevelop that front yard to take care of most of the runoff, and we're putting the proper drainage. And again, most of the driveway's becoming impervious, so that we can absorb most.
Most of it's going pervious, not.
I'm sorry, pervious, yeah.
So the whole area.
I was reversed though,
Yes, after it goes through that steep section, he's flattened it out a little bit and turned it into
There you go.
into pervious pavers, so that water has a way to soak into the ground. So again, it's doing all the things that we're trying to do.
No rain garden?
I'm
kidding.
Not in the middle of the driveway.
It kind of acts as one.
Right, it does.
There are some people, like on fields and stuff like that, they drill big holes down and they fill them with a lot of gravel so that the water can get into the ground and filter through there before, well, in the field, so they don't have puddles. But like at the lake, it would be good to have the filtering so there's much cleaner water going into where we
The
swim.
engineer has planned for drainage underneath that pervious section as well, beyond just the pavers.
With
Otherwise-
the changes we're making in the ordinances, shouldn't these kinds of issues be?
Well, that's one of the things is, that's why she's talking about it, is because even though we're making all the ordinances more readable and searchable, they still need to be updated, a whole
Right.
lot of them.
Had you known, was any of this given to you as part of that?
Not the new stuff, no.
No, not the new stuff.
That would take away all your fun, though.
Yeah, that would take the fun out of it.
So
I move that the Board of Selectmen grant a driveway variance to Mr. Marino at 680 East Wakefield Boulevard.
I'll second.
Any other questions? If not, all in favor? There you go.
Thank you. There's another one, almost a spit image of this one, that's gonna be coming to you sometime before September-ish, when we plan on putting it in. So,
You can change the ordinance before that.
yeah, right. It's two, I think it's two houses away in the same exact area, put pervious pavers into an area, but you just have that little steep section coming off of the exact same dimensions. So it's,
Yeah, now we just have all the driveways that go straight into the lake.
well, one at a time.
Those are boat ramps.
That's right.
All right, item C is proposed line item transfers. Proposed line item transfers, Josh?
I was just asking Anne Marie if she wanted to do the honors of discussing the line item transfers. Okay, let me have the fun, thank you. So this is an intra-departmental transfer of appropriations. There are several lines listed within the senior center's budget, and the hope is that we can have those designated funds transferred into the senior center's maintenance of structures line. There have been some unanticipated costs related to building maintenance this year. That seems to be a theme across the board. But this transfer would cover the costs of the maintenance of the building through the end of the fiscal year, and it does include a full hot water heater replacement, among other various maintenance items. And these are all the Healthy Aging Program, the office supplies, vehicle, gas, oil, and grease, maintenance of vehicles, and tires are all seeing relatively good years. So these are areas where we can make transfers to cover these maintenance of structures costs.
So what beyond a hot water heater is $11,000?
My understanding is that some of the painting of the outside of the building would be redone. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anne Marie. And actually, Jim, I know that Jen had spoken about some of those maintenance items. I believe it would just cover a small section of painting.
Yeah, the painting area is just a small section, I guess, on the northwest corner. There's something that got damaged some years ago, and they're just trying to get it fixed.
Yep.
The hot water heater, I think, is more like a boiler that does the hot water. I don't think it's a separate hot water heater.
No.
Yeah, it sounds weird.
Yeah.
$11,000 for a hot water heater.
Yeah, beyond that, I don't recall the details, sorry.
So may I have a motion for the transfer, please? Someone? Jonathan?
I move that the Board of Selectmen approve the line item transfer of $2,500 from Healthy Aging Program 813-800-0001, $1,000 from Office Supplies 813-806-0000, $2,500 from Vehicles, Gas, Oil, and Grease 813-820-00000, $4,500. Form Maintenance of Vehicles 813-827-0000, and $600 from Tires 813-846-0000, to Maintenance of Structures 813-827-0000, in the amount of $11,100.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
Thank you. Any other discussion on it?
Josh, and Jim, maybe since you were answering that, this building is the town's own building, right? We own it. And any work on it is part of the town's expense.
Correct.
That's correct.
Any other questions?
Unless a car hits it.
Say that?
Unless a car hits it again, and
Well,
then
yeah,
someone else pays for it.
And then somebody else's insurance covers it.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I've gotten all the agenda items before that we've moved around, so now we are on item 12, citizens' comments. We welcome your public comment, 3 minutes or less, and may speak once during this round. Please give your name and address. Thank you.
million. This bond will cost the citizens of Winsted if they approve it. I don't think that the citizens and the taxpayers of this town can afford more and more taxes, more and more increases, when our fuel costs, our gas costs, our taxes in the state of Connecticut are increasing ever so much, and our governor's on TV saying he's cutting taxes. Well, I don't believe him. Neither do I believe our president when he says it's Putin's fault that our gas prices are rising. We are not producing. In Winsted, we're at 1948 levels. 2020 census done by the United States government, this town is at 1948 population levels. This town is not a burgeoning metropolitan. It's not a big city. It is a small town. But yet we have now 2 assessors in the assessor's office. It has increased double what it was in 2020, their budget. We have 2 assessors. Now, we did have only 1 for over 20 years that I've lived in this town. We only had 1 assessor. Now we got 2 assessors. And the taxpayers have had it when it comes to tax increases in this town. I'm predicting that the good taxpayers who are paying too much for food, paying too much for gas, and paying too much for everything else under these failed policies of, yeah, we can just do it, let's bond, let's put the credit card out, and we'll pay the high interest rates. Let's keep going like that. Phony baloney money. Give the money to businesses like Honey Buns that just closed, and all these other businesses that have closed in Winston. And I can name hundreds that have closed since 1948. So, this phony baloney money, the people approve it, then they better pay it. Because you're going to have more taxpayers, probably including yourself, selling that big house on Meadow Street. Because you know why? People can't afford it. $26 million plus. According to your bond counsel, you add the other Hinsdale School, which we're not paying for yet, it's $1.7 million.
I'm sorry, your 3 minutes is up.
$34 million.
Thank you for your comments. But
Thank you
time is
very
up.
much, and I hope the people vote no on the bond.
Is there anyone else? Okay then, no one else. We'll move on to Selectmen's comments and reports. Does anyone have anything they want to bring up? I know, go ahead.
Yeah, just remind everyone that we're doing the Earth Day cleanup on this coming Saturday at 9:30, meeting in front of the old IGA.
So people can come and help with the Earth Day cleanup. A lot of people come down on Main Street to help. Also, right after that, at 11 o'clock, is the Little League opening ceremony. A great tradition here in town that we hope a lot of people come to. Is there anything else for anyone?
Yes. On April 6th, the Board of Recreation had a very successful meeting that included myself as liaison, Mr. Shagru, and Melanie Brady-Shanley. And we went over the questions and topics such as, is the recreation mission statement in alignment with both WPS and TGS overview for students? We went over that. Are there other groups and organizations we should be collectively engaged with? What does each group feel is their top 2 to 3 areas which they can excel at, and what are the 2 to 3 areas which need improvement? Have surveys been performed to prospective populations recently gained feedback? What population of students do we feel are not currently being supported enough? What do you think needs to change to address and improve the specific population? What types of infrastructure / resources or other improvements are needed to sustain or enhance existing programs? What are thoughts why engagement of both children and parents in programs is somewhat lacking as compared to years past? Are they specific areas of concerns? Based upon diversified makeup of our community, can we share best practices / methods for communication? At the higher level, high school athletics, how well are our children prepared? Would like to share both success stories and failures of programs implemented. And finally, would like to entertain offering high school student representation on rec board in future. We went over these things and it was a very successful meeting.
Thank you. Any updates for anybody else?
Yeah, earlier today, I sent you all a email from the, acting as the chairman of the Soldiers Monument Commission with a proposal for improving 2 parks in town. I wish you to take a look at it. It's a unique way to use a specially designed fund that can only be used for one of the parks, and it can provide improvements. Please look at that proposal, and I'll be talking to Josh and other people about it too. But since the Soldiers Monument Commission has proposed it, we've gotten some pretty interesting feedback that what we're proposing is kind of unique.
I just have a question with regards to Dudley Park getting that particular monument you want to move down there. How do we know that Dudley Park in a few years won't want to move it somewhere else? How do we know it would be like a permanent move if we invest that much money?
Well, we don't, because the Dudley Park does not have anything other than the town's Public Works Department managing it.
Okay.
So if there was a special group that was managing the George Dudley Memorial Park, then they would have access to making some decisions on that. But our proposal, first of all, the first proposal is to get it out of.
No, I understand that, but it's also $30,000 of, isn't it $30,000 to move it or to fix things?
No. We don't know what it's gonna cost to move it. Probably, it's not gonna cost that much.
Well, maybe I'm mixing it up with
No,
another
the
document.
30,000 was what the original construction.
Okay.
That was not just the architectural design, that was all the plumbing that went with it and the whole fountain area.
Well, yeah, because I don't have a problem with it moves, I just don't want to see it move twice.
Well, we would like it out.
Well, I know that. And then again, is that our decision or is it the decision of management?
Well, since the
Well,
Soldiers.
that's for the whole board, not
Yeah,
just for you to
since
answer.
the Soldiers Monument Commission is appointed by this board, that's why I copied and made sure that all the members of the Board of Selectmen knew this too.
Did I read something about you wanted to plant laurel up at Soldiers Monument?
Well, we want to remove that architectural piece
But you wanted to ask you about planting laurel.
and put a laurel bush in replacement of
Right.
it.
Do
We
you-
already plant a lot of flowers around that.
Have you done research to see if that would survive there? It's my point, because normally that is not an area where a laurel would survive.
So far, those people who understand some planting have said, we think it could be done. So, you know, if it doesn't, we put more bushes on another kind of
Right,
bush.
it just normally laurel is in a shaded, wooded area, so if
Yes,
you're
and
having
that's
it.
very sunny, I understand that.
Right.
And it may not be the most appropriate bush, but
I know we'd like to put laurel everywhere.
Everywhere.
But it's not gonna survive
Yeah.
in certain areas.
so if it's not laurel, it'll be another,
Right, I'm just.
and not a Christmas tree either. Won't be a Christmas tree.
All right, I have a couple comments. In the past, I might not have said anything, but I've learned that it's important to make sure that we get facts on the record for when people are either watching the meeting or the press is reporting it, or it ends up out on Facebook land, that we know that we're accurate with our information. The Board of Selectmen has kept the same mill rate for the past 6 years. The mill rate may have affected different properties with their valuation, or cars with different valuations, but this board, to a person, and every one of us has made an effort with the town managers that we've had to keep the mill rate, the same mill rate over the past, and this year included, 6 years. Everything that we have for information is available on the website. Everything can be found in every financial document to back up what I just said. So everything for correct information is out there. We have, in this current budget, over the past few weeks, reduced spending in it to make sure that we kept money in our reserve accounts for us, for the bondings that we're proposing coming forward. We have also had a town manager and staff that have written numerous grants and have been successful at these grants. We have had grants from the Building Healthier Communities Fund that is putting money into our local businesses with facades. The ARPA money has been here to help with businesses in terms of their growth, which Josh, to my right, I think has done a great job in putting together committees of people to do this work. He does these things with committees of people. The proposals within the road infrastructure have been on the table for over 5 years. We have looked carefully at them, and we know it doesn't do everybody's road, but we also know if we don't do these bigger roads, we're not gonna be doing any of them. So I just ask people to make sure that you look at the facts. I understand that you could have disagreements. I could understand if you don't believe that we need something right now, or if you believe that we should not spend the money, that is one thing. But please don't distort the facts. The facts that we have are in all of our documents, as I said, on our websites and whatnot. Put all these things that came forward, came through our committees. We have grant money and money that we haven't had before that have been the work of everyone. And I really think that people should take a serious look at all this and look at the facts, because Josh will have everything up on the website that's not already there today. And we'll be moving forward with that at our annual town meeting, and then the referendum for the infrastructure proposal. So, any other comments from anyone?
I'd like to second your remarks and thank Josh. This is your first budget in Winchester. And I'd like to thank you and Anne Marie and the whole accounting department for all of the hard work that went into comprising the budget. And on the roads program, it's been in the works for 5 or 6 years now. You know, we're finally at a point where we can move forward with confidence. And all of the people, including Bruce Stratford, Jim Rollins, and the crew who worked on this plan for 5 years, you know, congratulations and best of luck at the referendum. I think we're gonna make it, and it's a great move forward. With that, I move we adjourn.
I'll second it. All in favor? Okay, thank you.